Namaste. You're listening to the Savasana podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavanaSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savana family. Thank you so much for being here and welcome back to the show. I am here today to share with you some of my sleeping tips. I have been having the best sleep of my life the past couple weeks, and a lot of it is due to tips that I learned here on the show from interviewing experts and playing around with things in my sleep setup. I wanted to share all of this with you in today's episode. And before we dive in, I just want to thank SavanaSpirit.com. They make this entire podcast possible. So if you haven't yet checked out their incredible online store full of beautiful yoga clothing and crystals and healing gifts, I mean, they have so much to offer. I would encourage you to do that. And if you've never purchased something there before, you can use this code TAKE25 for $25 off anything in your shopping cart if you are a new customer. So it's a really, really great deal, $25 off anything you desire. And if you haven't yet left a rating or review for the show, if you do that, I will intern. How it works is you're going to leave a review, screenshot it with your phone, and then just email it to my team. So info@brettlarkin.com. This is also in the show notes if you want to see it all written out. But you're just going to email us that screenshot of your review, and we'll respond with a really beautiful PDF booklet full of my favorite affirmations and journaling prompts. This is just a thank you from me to you for taking the time to leave a review, because it's what really supports the show and helps get it in front of more people looking to transform their life through yoga and meditation. All right, now diving into my tips. The big thing that I have changed in my sleep setup is that I have started taking a yoga bolster. I know it sounds crazy, full-on yoga bolster into bed with me. I know, intimate. So I am putting this yoga bolster underneath my knees. A lot of this is inspired by the Savasana episode that I did with Judith, Hanson, Lasater. And then I started having a lot of takeaways where I started taking little mini naps as I could in the morning or in the afternoon. Now, mini naps, what I'm saying is I wasn't actually falling asleep. I was just taking or gifting myself a Savasana, a 10 to 15 minute, sometimes 20-minute Savasana, where I just lie down in my bed and I would have the bolster underneath my knees. I'll link up the episode where I talk about the importance of this in the show notes. But I started finding that when I would do this setup with the bolster under my knees and a lot of other things that I'll go into in a moment, that I would feel so comfortable. It's just like sleep was so easy. It was potentially around the corner, even though I was choosing just to rest and not actually letting myself fall asleep. Because if you nap for real during the day, sometimes you wake up groggy and not feeling so great. So instead, we just want to do like active relaxation, rest. But then when it comes time for bed in the evening, you do actually want to fall asleep, right? So I started thinking, well, can I take some of these tools that have been working so well for sort of my Savasana and bring them into the bedroom for nighttime sleep? So bolster under the knees may seem strange, but what I wanted to do, especially because I'm a side sleeper, and you might be listening to this and you also might be a side sleeper, but one of the things I really wanted to do was to become someone who sleeps on their back. I know. What I found over the years is that when you sleep on your side, one side of the body just gets really, really tight. And I found that I was way more susceptible to head and neck pain because my head would end up, even with, my fancy pillows and everything I could do to try to, make it so I was comfortable on my side, I'd just end up sleeping off. And about once or twice a month, I'd wake up with my neck just feeling totally out of sorts. And I'd often even have to go to a chiropractor or my myofascial release therapist to sort of get relief. Also, I'd really want to take, so say I was sleeping on my left side, I'd really want to take my left forearm and bicep kind of underneath my head as I slept on my side. And that's really awful for the left shoulder because you're sleeping, putting pressure on the left shoulder all night long. So I've known for a long time that being a side sleeper isn't the greatest for your body's overall health in terms of waking up in the morning feeling refreshed. And just think about it. It's also just asymmetrical. I mean, most of us prefer one side, right? Overall, it's very rare that you find someone who sleeps, 50% of the night on one side and 50% of the night on the other side and everything works out, right? It's usually less symmetrical than that. So I decided that I really wanted to see if I could become someone who slept on their back with a bolster underneath their knees, because I found that when I was taking Savasana and on my back, I just didn't have any of this kind of like torquing of the head or neck. Things just felt so much more easeful. And another big epiphany for me was that I didn't need all these pillows. I'm someone who likes to sleep with 2 pillows under my head. But the minute I started sleeping on my back, I noticed that kind of jutted my head forward and took my cervical curve into more flexion than was needed. So I needed one pillow, just one thin pillow actually. And then my whole tailbone and crown of head were kind of in one line in my bed, and it felt amazing. So how did this go? Is it possible to actually train yourself to sleep on your back when your entire life you've been a side sleeper? Here's what I have to report. It is working, I'd say 50% of the time, which if you think about the fact that you sleep 50% of your life, if you can reduce the amount you're sleeping on your side by 50%, that is huge. I mean, that means your body's in more of a state of homeostasis with you lying down on your back than being kind of curled up and all kind of cranky in the neck potentially on your side. Now, when I was sleeping on my side, I always had a pillow in between my knees, kind of just like a normal size pillow that you'd use for your head. But what I found was that with the bolster underneath my knees lying flat, it provided so much relief to my low back. So like many people, I have a little bit of excess lordosis in my low back, meaning that I have a tendency to kind of stick my belly button out and pop my booty back. And what this leads to in the long run is a lot of pressure on those in the lumbar spine, right? In the low back. This is why so many of us suffer from low back pain. So what I found was that when I started sleeping with the bolster underneath my knees, it just really, really helped my low back relax. And I feel like my low back, since doing this and sleeping this way, has actually come into its neutral curve for the first time in my entire life. Now, this is coupled with a lot of yoga where I'm working my abs and working my low back, right? Because the abdominal muscles are the front of your lumbar spine. So strengthening those is a really good idea because it's going to, help keep the low back in neutral instead of coming into that excess lordosis or booty popping. So hugely, hugely, hugely helpful just to find low back relief at night. Now, when I would turn to my side, because I still sleep on my side sometimes, I just keep the bolster in between my knees and it's kind of really wide. But I found that it's okay. It sort of works for me, even though it's really, really wide. And again, I think this is because I'm also a woman. I have wider hips. I've had a baby, right? Instead of having a pillow between my knees, I just use the bolster the same way. Okay, so this lumbar relief, like even if you only end up sleeping on your back, as I said, 20% or 30% of the night, but your lumbar, your low back is finally just totally relaxed because your knees are elevated because you have this bolster under your knees. So there's no strain or tension in the low back. Again, I think it's a game changer and such a win because we sleep 50% of our life almost, right? So again, just think of the percentage of even if you got an hour or 2 hours in the night where you were lying on your back, sleeping on your back with the knees elevated on the bolster, how much relief that's going to give your lumbar spine if you're someone who, has maybe low back pain or excess lumbar lordosis like me. It's really, really a game changer. Other tips I want to talk about here, placing the hands, if you're lying on your back, just kind of on your heart or on your sternum. And this gets the elbows bent. So you have suddenly both knees in flexion. So there's no pressure on the low back or pressure on the joints. You're just creating this lovely sukha space in the knees and the hips. And then all of a sudden you take the hands to the heart or, somewhere on the sternum as well. And it's the same for the shoulder and elbow joint. All of a sudden there's just ease. It's like we have all the joints in flexion all of a sudden. I already talked about how you might need less pillows or less head support once you're lying down on your back. And I'd encourage you, if you want to play with this at home, to even take all your pillows off your bed and just see what it feels like to lie on your back with a bolster under your knees to go to sleep with no pillow at all. And it's just interesting. I wouldn't suggest sleeping that way. I'd have one thin pillow. But all of a sudden you just see like, oh, these are my neutral spinal curves. This is what it feels like. And I'm in my bed and it feels great. And I have have the covers on. The other thing that was a huge game changer for me when sort of hacking my sleep was sleeping with an eye pillow or something covering my eyes. Now, a lot of people like to use face masks that are kind of thin, like the kind they give you on international flights where it just covers your eyes. And that's great. That's a good place to start. Because it gives you blackout, right? So there's no light. So that's going to definitely help you sleep, because even once your eyes are closed, your eyeballs are still moving inside. Even with your eyelids closed, your eyeballs are reacting to like light and noise and things it thinks it sees, right? So if you can black out, it's going to help the optic nerve relax. But even better than just a blackout is to actually put weight on the eyes, especially if you have kind of restless eye syndrome, which is something that I have. And I didn't know that I had it until I was, in my late 20s, I think. And it was a game changer for me once I figured out I had it, because I started sleeping with a weighted eye pillow, like the kind you'd see in a yoga studio, on my eyes. And what it did is, in addition to providing a blackout, it sort of, if you have restless eye syndrome, what that means is that it means even when your eyes are closed, they still flutter, right? So it means that the amount of light that's getting into your eyes, even with the eyes closed, and there's light even in a dark room, right? Like if you have a window, unless you have complete blackout shades, even then there's still probably light because you have electronics plugged in and, who knows what else. So if you have restless eye syndrome, it means your eyes are like darting around in your head even more than they should be. Like they never get a chance to fully shut off and relax, because your eyelids are constantly fluttering even when they're shut. So by placing a weighted eye pillow on the eyes, it sort of forces the eyelids to close and stop fluttering. And finally, the optic nerve can just fully shut down and relax. And I remember the first time that I slept with a weighted eye pillow in my late 20s, I woke up and I felt like I had actually slept for the first time in my entire life. I remember feeling very tired all of high school. Thought that was a normal teenage thing. I'm sure part of it was, but I think it was also, I just wasn't getting a solid, deep sleep cycle because of this restless eye syndrome that I never even knew that I had. Because unless someone tells you you have it, you won't know because you can't see yourself with your eyes closed, right? So I was lucky that I had a massage therapist tell me, a myofascial release therapist tell me that I had this. Whether you have it or not, putting this weighted pressure on the eyes, I think, is so insanely beneficial. So we're going deeper than a sleep mask here, right? Because it needs to be weighted. And it needs to also be heavier, in my opinion, than a typical yoga eye pillow. Those yoga eye pillows are great. If you have one, it's a good place to start. And again, it will fall off over the course of the night, right? My pillow falls off every night, but it's on for, again, a good hour or 2 hours before I start tossing and turning at night or shifting positions. That's still a huge win, right? That's still a lot more time than no time at all when you add it up as every night for your whole life, right? So what I would suggest is actually making your own eye pillow, or I aspire to make one today to sell because so many of you asked me for this. But what you actually want is like a yoga sandbag eye pillow that is bigger than the ones that are currently offered. So the ones that are available right now, what I found from personal experience, again, they're great for the yoga studio, they're great for a quick Savasana, but to really, really find that deep relaxation for the optic nerve, and especially if you have restless eye syndrome, you need something bigger and you need something heavier. And if you've seen my morning routine on YouTube, I think I have 2 different ones now, one from when I didn't have a baby, and then I made another one to show kind of my morning routine as a mom. But in that first one, I for sure show the eye pillow, and I'll link that up below as well so you can see how large it is. And I'd say it's about double the weight of a typical eye pillow sandbag. So it's a lot heavier and it's a lot bigger, and that was a huge game changer in my sleep for me. But even with that, I was still experiencing a lot of the low back pain and like yuckiness from side sleeping and occasionally sleeping on my neck wrong that I mentioned before. So adding in the bolster is huge. Now, let's talk about when you're traveling, right? When you're traveling, what I found is actually using less pillows, or taking all the pillows that a hotel might have and using them underneath my legs to create that bolster as opposed to under my head, has been a game changer. Because again, one of the biggest ways that you can sort of mess up your body when you sleep is by sleeping on your head and neck wrong. And the minute you're dealing with new pillows, like pillows you don't know in a hotel or foreign environment, the risk that you're going to just sort of sleep on your head or neck the wrong way it increases like tenfold. So I would definitely think of all the pillows that most hotels give you as putting them down at the bottom of the bed to make this bolster for your knees, and having just one or maybe even no pillows. Maybe you can roll up a spare blanket or something like that. That for me has also been a huge game changer, because I'd find that I would get a stiff neck almost any time I traveled and I was sleeping in a sleep environment that wasn't my own. In my episode about Savasana and my personal Savasana hacks, I talked about the heating pad and how I had bought Walgreens, little heating pad for when my baby was born. Our midwife said we'd really want a heating pad to keep him warm, right after he was born. And we used it and we loved it. And then he doesn't need it anymore, but I rediscovered it as this amazing, amazing tool for my low back. So I'd put the heating pad on my bed before I brush my teeth or start kind of my wind down ritual. I'd turn the heating pad on, put it in my bed, and let it get warm so that by the time I finished brushing my teeth and came into sleep, I could lie down on this amazing hot pad that would sort of be, like at my low back. So from kind of my booty to my bra line, feels amazing. One thing though that I would suggest if you're doing this is to turn it off right before you fall asleep. So mine has like a little clicker, and I really enjoy the heat. And then when I notice that I'm getting really tired and starting to doze off, I just turn it off, because if you sleep with something like that on, it's likely going to wake you up because you'll get too hot in the middle of the night. So the heating pad's a great hack, but I just wouldn't use it throughout the duration of the entire night. My biggest takeaway for you, if you are still listening, like the number one thing to take away from this episode is that if you suffer from low back pain, which I think a huge majority of us do, just try sleeping with a bolster under your knees. Just try it. Even if you end up like kicking the bolster off the bed after half an hour of trying to fall asleep or something like that, I still think it's worth it, just so you can feel the low back fully relax. Even if it's just 30 minutes a night, who knows? Again, like maybe you'll end up sleeping that way and it'll end up being like 2 hours a night. And again, if you add up these changes, because we can work on the yoga mat and try to balance the curves of the spine and, do all these things. And we will, and we do, right? But if you can hack some of this into your sleep, it is just the biggest win, right? Because instead of trying to have to correct or readjust something in your yoga practice, it's just like naturally you've helped the low back relaxed or helped the spine be in neutral for hours a day, potentially, while you're just sleeping. It is like the biggest game changer win in terms of just like best utilizing your sleep time, right? So instead of your sleep time being a detriment to your overall well-being or to the neutral curves of your spine, that anatomical homeostasis that we want to be in as much as possible, so there's not pressure, undue pressure, unnecessary pressure being put on the body. It's such a huge win, because what I really realized is, by being a side sleeper, I was putting all this unnecessary pressure on the body, taking the spine out of its neutral curves, taking my head and neck out of its neutral curves, and it just wasn't worth it. It was really harming my body in the long run, and it's such an easy thing to fix. And I did a couple years ago think about this, and I was just like, well, I'm a side sleeper. I can't change that. That's just how I sleep. That's how I've always slept. I'm a side sleeper. And I think what shifted for me over the years, because if you're thinking that too, it's like, oh, well, I could never sleep any other way than on my side. I would just encourage you to question that, to reconsider, right? After, completing some of the 40-day Kriyas that I've done that have been so challenging, hardest meditations I've ever done with my arms above my head for 11 minutes, after giving birth, basically unassisted to my child, right? I was like, I'm a strong person, right? Like, I think I can tackle changing how I sleep too. And you're the same, right? If you're listening to this, like, you are strong. It seems like, you just developed a habit of sleeping that way. It's not like dictated down that that's how you have to sleep, right? That's just a habit that's been ingrained. And just like any other habit or any other thing that's difficult, like, you can change it slowly over time. So I just want you to feel really empowered about that. You can retrain yourself how to sleep. I've done it and it's amazing and I love it, because again, in terms of getting the most bang for your buck, in terms of changing something about your behavior, we're sleeping 50% of our lives basically. So I think I sound like a broken record now, but it's like, if you can shift some of those hours to work in your favor in terms of helping you recover from an injury or low back pain, it is so worth it. All right. So I'm going to leave you with that note. And I'm also going to add, because I know people are going to ask me about this, the bolster shape that I like to use for underneath my knees is the oval bolster, right? Most bolsters come in an oval shape and a round shape. I really like the oval because it's not as high as the round. So if I do end up sleeping on my side instead, it's like more compact between my knees than a full round one would be. I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, and suggestions about sleep. Remember, we have a private Facebook group, savanaspirit.com/group. We'll redirect you there. You can always find me on social media. So look me up on YouTube, Larkin Yoga TV. You should find all my videos right away, and on Instagram at Larkin Yoga TV if you want to, just send me a shout out about this episode or request topics for future ones. I'm sending you so much love, and I will hopefully connect with you in the next Savana episode. From my heart to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Savana podcast. To find out more about Savana, go to savanaspirit.com or follow Savana on Facebook at facebook.com/SavanaSpirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savanaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savana podcast.